She joined us at around 2 million, and we helped her grow into the tens of millions, into the 8 figures. I got involved in a fraternity for a short period of time. I was a pledge, and then I got kicked out. I've always been obsessed with business ever since I was a kid. I'm incredibly passionate about who entrepreneurs are and who we are as a collective and as a movement in the world.
This is the Content Capitalists Podcast. We talk to business owners who've used video to grow their businesses to $1 million a year or more. How they did it, what worked, what didn't. Welcome to the Content Capitalists with your host, Ken Okazaki.
Welcome back to another episode of the Content Capitalists, where I speak with 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners and ask them their story about content creation and how it's working for them. And more importantly, how they first got started. So today I've got with me somebody who definitely I'd consider a mentor, and I'm trying to get to the stage where we call each other friends, but we haven't met each other enough times where I feel comfortable with that yet. But I feel very friendly with him. First time I met him, I'll never forget this. There was probably several thousand people in the room. He gets up on stage and he puts up this big chart on his slides, and it's called the Billionaire Code. And I was just like, okay, everybody's talking about 7 figures. And this was, by the way, 2 Comma Club event, Funnel Hacking Live. And now he's changing the whole perspective to think about it from a billionaire perspective. So ever since then, I've been reading and watching everything he puts out. Alex Charfen, welcome to the podcast.
Ken, thank you for that gracious intro, and I appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Well, Alex, I have followed you for ever since then. Actually, that's the first time I've been exposed to you and your content. And one thing I've noticed is when you make content, especially podcasts, because you are a machine when it comes to that. And I know you make a lot of other content too. There's always something about it, about the passion of how you deliver it, that I could have heard the same thing 6, 7, maybe 100 times. But when you're in my ear and I'm driving my car, for some reason it sticks. And I thought I'm a bit of a business geek when it comes to this stuff, but I remember I hadn't listened to you in a little while, and my wife says, "Hey, I listened to this podcast. You're going to love it." And I thought it was going to be about plants or about, gardening or something, because that's her thing. And it's you. And I was like, oh, okay, that's it. I'm surrounded on all sides now. My wife, who's not a business geek, is listening to you and suggesting it. So, that's just my relationship with you, is mostly in my ear while I'm driving. Alex, could you tell, for the sake of the listener, what is it you actually do these days? What's your business?
So we help entrepreneurs put process, structure, and routine into their lives so that they can grow businesses and not have to do everything themselves. And, right now, today, we run a mastermind, a coaching mastermind, where we show entrepreneurs how to do things that nobody else talks about. Simplify your operations, put planning into your business, and then high-level execution that creates a level of leadership that most entrepreneurs know they can do, but don't have the structure and the process to actually get there.
Okay. And every time you say that, I'm internally and probably physically nodding my head. Like, you ticked off all the marks of the stuff that I think a couple of the things I've kind of crossed those hurdles, but there's a lot more. I'm like, well, every time I hear that, I feel like you're hitting me, where I used to be, where I am, and where I want to be. So there's something I'm going to guess that's a really well thought out and rehearsed thing you just said now, or at least you said it so many times that it doesn't take any effort anymore.
I get asked often. I think one of the interesting things about what I do, Ken, is, I wrote the book, The Entrepreneurial Personality Type, and I've done a lot of speaking that people would probably classify as like personal development or motivational or something like that. I'm incredibly passionate about who entrepreneurs are and who we are as a collective and who we are as a movement in the world. And so as a result, a lot of people know who I am and understand, and have a better understanding of themselves, but they often don't really understand exactly what we do. So it's one of the questions I get most often at events, or one of the get most often when I'm out somewhere is, man, I follow you. I listen to the podcast. I've seen your videos. What do you guys do? And so I end up answering that question a lot.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Now, Alex, before you got into this coaching space, for entrepreneurs, you've had quite a colorful entrepreneurial journey. Would you mind giving us the high level view from, let's just start all the way from your first entrepreneurial venture. This is probably, a week after you're born, I'm going to guess that this happened.
I mean, it's kind of close. I was always that kid that was super different, and I didn't really love school or didn't feel very successful in school. I wasn't very successful socially. I didn't have a lot of places where I felt like I belonged. And when I was about 8 years old, due to some issues that happened in my family, my dad and I ended up working together. And out of necessity, I was working with my father every weekend in a swap meet, or in some places you call it a flea market. Internationally, they call it a bazaar. And when I started working in business, I found this place where like I understood things. There was this transactional nature, I could be successful. And so as a kid, I was always doing something. I was like selling stuff on the side. I had a window washing company in my teens. You go back to the first entrepreneurial venture, and I was like selling stuff to the neighbors and, offering like weed picking services where I would charge one fee and then have the kids in the neighborhood go pick the weeds and pay them a different fee. And created like margin there.
And did you figure that out yourself, or did you observe that from somewhere, like getting a contract, which is literally a verbal contract, and then hiring out that contract to somebody else? Did that click in your own mind, or did someone teach you that?
I don't know. I mean, I probably learned it through observation, but it was something that I always did. I had a window washing company in my teens, and I did the same thing. I would go get the deals and then have somebody else go wash all the windows. And in college, we had a financial consulting company where I would go out and get the deals, and then my partner wrote all the software, but we had other people that did all the work for us. Like, I think I'm one of those people who's not great at details. If I need to actually pick the weeds, it takes a long time, and that's hard for me. And so I think a lot of it I did out of necessity, if that makes sense.
Okay, got it. So you just saw the need, and then would you say you're a problem solver then? Like, I got too many weeds to pick and not enough time. Let's solve this problem and then hire someone.
Probably. I mean, maybe problem solver, maybe an opportunist. Maybe just kind of naturally understood that if I wanted to do things that involving other people was easier, even though it wasn't my favorite. I didn't, I would have loved to have done stuff independently, but for me, having other people do things was almost a necessity for most of the time that I've run businesses. I mean, in junior high school, I remember asking my mom to take me to like a big warehouse store, and I bought a bunch of candy. And so I got it at wholesale prices, and I went to school and I started selling it. And after like 2 weeks of selling candy, I realized like transacting the candy and having people crowded around me, I hated that part. So I had two other people that were in my school start selling the candy, and I managed the business. And so each of them, one of them would go to the back of the school, one would be in the front, and I'd walk back and forth and be sure everything was okay. When I tell that story and I look back at it now, I'm like, why didn't those guys go buy candy themselves? But they didn't, like it was, that's what we did. I ended up actually getting in trouble in junior high school where they tried to ban me from selling candy because the cafeteria sales of food had dropped so much that they were having trouble like with maintaining the cafeteria.
You're literally a drug lord. You're selling sugar to kids and then you got your minions working for you.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, it was funny in school, they tried to stop me. And so they made it so that you couldn't sell candy unless it was a part of a charity, because that was like a charity building activity. So then I started giving money to a charity. And then a long story short, they said you couldn't sell food at school. Then I started selling earrings and bracelets back in the 80s when everybody wore big earrings and bracelets. To make a long story short, they finally ended up having a school board meeting, and they created a rule that was referred to as the Alex Charfen rule, where they made it that no student could sell anything on a Irvine Unified School District campus without prior approval from the principal. So they were like, done, you're out of business. And so, I was always like that. And so in college, I had a financial consulting firm with a friend of mine. I ended up selling it to him and leaving that.
I just want to dig in a little deeper. How do you go from selling candy to being a financial consultant, which people pay a lot more for financial consulting than candy, obviously. Now, was there a degree you had? Was there an internship?
No.
Okay. So did you one day look at a spreadsheet and say, hey, guess what? I could optimize this so well. You should pay me. Like, where did that aha moment come from as an entrepreneur that you could charge people for giving them financial advice?
Okay, so this is gonna sound. So when I say financial consulting, let me tell you exactly what we did. By the way, I like to give both sides of the bio. Like when somebody gets introduced for a speech, they share all the highlights. But in every entrepreneur's life, every highlight has an obstacle in front of it. And every highlight has challenges behind it and all kinds of stuff. So when I say financial consulting firm, my friend Price and I in college I got involved in a fraternity for a short period of time. I was a pledge and then I got kicked out. But in the short period of time I was involved with the fraternity, I realized how much money was moving through this system. It was at Cal State Fullerton, and there was tens of thousands of dollars being collected by like a 17-year-old kid and in dues for the fraternity. So my friend Price and I got together and we started a billing and collections company for fraternities and sororities. And at first we were doing a whole bunch of stuff manually and, like keeping books manually. And then Price wrote a software where we could do billing and collections automatically. In fact, we used like a supermarket scanner where we would send out a bill, and as long as somebody sent back the tab, we could scan the bill and know exactly who to apply the money for. And after a couple of years, we were billing and collecting for most of the major fraternities in the country and sororities in the country. I went to University of Ohio, or the University of Miami in Ohio. And that's where a lot of those places are headquartered. And we ended up getting a bunch of contracts. And here's the punchline though, Ken, like we didn't understand scope and scale. So we had this amazing billing software that we were doing in this very limited market called fraternities and sororities. And a company came and acquired that software to do billing at a larger scale with utilities. So they started doing like electrical billing and water billing, which was something we could have seen and could have done, but
that's every single household in the United States.
Well, not to that extent. They were doing billing and collection.
Total addressable market is every household.
Yeah, total scope. Yeah, so we went from this itty bitty market where we had mastered it and still weren't hugely successful, sold it to that company, and they ended up doing a lot more with it.
Do you remember at the peak of that business that you started, like how much were you making on that?
Oh man. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but here's the story I can tell you. The day that I left college, I was already very frustrated with college. I had gone to a few schools in Southern California. I was going to finish my degree at Cal State Fullerton. I found myself arguing with business teachers more than agreeing with them. And I was in a marketing course where this teacher was teaching us about direct response marketing. And she said something like, the best direct response marketing campaigns, the best direct response mail campaigns get about 1% to 2% conversion. And I said, well, we're getting 12. And she said, well, there's no direct marketing campaign that gets 12. That's just ridiculous. You can't get 12% contact on a direct marketing campaign. So the next class, I brought in what we were doing. And what we had done is we had created a marketing campaign where we put people's like name into what looked like invitation, and they were opening it, and we were getting a ton of calls, and we were getting a ton of they don't use these anymore, but like the free reply mail stuff where somebody drops it in the mail and you call them back. And so I had already argued with this teacher, and like 2 or 3 classes later, the teacher put up a slide on an overhead projector. This is how old I am. So not a PowerPoint slide, but this was back when they used those sheets, the clear sheet slides. And she put up a slide, and it was the average salaries for the people who were graduating from every business discipline at Cal State Fullerton. And I looked at it, and the top salary, we were making about double. And I remember thinking, so if I sit here, I might cut my income in half. And I as she put up the slide and she was explaining it, I gathered up my things. I left. That was my last day in school.
Wow. I had a similar experience, but this story is about you. I'm going to try to be super quick. I remember I was, I think 13 years old, and I'm sitting in the back of the class, and the teacher is teaching something. And I'm like, this feels like deja vu. And sure enough, I look at my notes, and they taught the same thing like 2 weeks ago. So I went to my dad. I said, Dad, this is crazy. I can't sit in class anymore. And he goes, why? And I said, well, I think they're teaching to the, level of the slowest person in the room. And I asked how much more school is there, and he explained, well, you got high school, then university. And I was like, nope, can't do it. And I just kept bugging him, and then he put me in a correspondence course where I could, graduate or go at my own pace. And I did it all. I think at 15, I finished college and high school simultaneously because I was taking 2 courses. And then I said, hey, can I? No, actually, what I said is I want to leave home. And he says, no, you got to finish school first. So I just I'll tell you what, I probably cheated on half of the stuff because my goal was to get out. It's about the objective, not the process. But at 15, I graduated both, and I said I'm leaving, and he says, "No, you can't leave." And I showed him the passing grades. I said I'm gone, and I left home at 17, and it's a different journey. But I just, this is entrepreneurial. The book you wrote, Entrepreneurial Personality Type, I cross every single one of those T's off, and what you described there, I think that's a part of your gift, is describing what is the entrepreneurial condition, the human condition that entrepreneurs have. Nobody nails it like you do. So thank you for sharing that story and allowing me to also relate with mine.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, Ken, because I always share with people that as entrepreneurial personality types, we either survive the system or we learn how to game the system, but we never feel like the system's set up for us. And your story totally exemplifies that. It's like, oh, there's this system where I'm going to have to go as slow as the slowest person in the room. And I want momentum. I want to get ahead. I want to feel things moving forward. And so what did you do? You figured out how to do it on your own and did it in a fraction of the time that the average person would, because, as entrepreneurs, as EPTs, entrepreneurial personality types, we live for that feeling of momentum. We live for that feeling of achievement. We live for that feeling of making things happen and getting things done. And when we're in a system where we're held to the lowest common denominator, it's excruciating. That's how college, that's how high school, that's how all of school felt for me. And so I was always either surviving the system or gaming the system. And so I never looked at it as cheating. I just looked at it as like social engineering. How do I get out of this? How do I make the pain go away? How do I make it so that I'm not just completely wanting to tear my hair out?
Yeah, totally get it. So you got out of this business. You probably made a little bit of money selling it out.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And did you continue working with that business partner of yours, Price, or did you move on to other things?
No, we've remained friends. Throughout the years, we've known each other for 30 years now. And throughout the years, we've done a bunch of different businesses together. At one point, we owned bitcoinwallet.com together, one of the first Bitcoin wallet sites. And we started that in 2014. So it did really well because it was pretty well known. It's still out there. It still does really well. Price now owns that himself. Yeah, we've done stuff, on and off together, but I moved from California after after I sold the business to Price. I moved from California to Florida. I was supposed to work with the company that bought the business from us for a year. I ended up making it 8 months. I was not a good team member, not a good employee. It was really difficult for me. In fact, the guy that I worked for kind of became legendary in the Florida, Jacksonville area, the Orlando, Jacksonville area. His name was Cameron Kuhn. And if you do a search on him, he's known as the guy who took down downtown Orlando and Jacksonville, like single-handedly bankrupted both of those areas. It was crazy. I was like working for one of the most out of control entrepreneurs that there ever was. And so when I got out of that business, through luck, like I would love to say that it was because I was so awesome, but through luck, I ended up with a friend of mine going to an interview with him for a consulting company he owned. And he was going to go interview to represent Fuji Film and Fuji Media and Fuji Digital Cameras in New York. And I went with him. I lived in Florida, and we ended up getting a contract for Florida, not New York, and then a business was born. So I had a consulting company where my first manufacturer's rep firm, my first account was Fuji. My second account was Targus, computer carrying cases. My third account was Fuji Digital Cameras. So I had Fuji Media and the Fuji Digital Cameras. And then throughout a 10-year period, I represented some of the biggest names in computer and consumer electronics and worked with some of the largest retailers. And back then, companies like Home Shopping Network, which used to be the fourth largest network back when there was just TV, not streaming. And so, yeah, it was intense, very intense.
Alex, I have to make a decision here, right? Because I'm looking at the clock and I want to respect your time. I want to hear all of this stuff, but I know there's no way we're going to get into what you're currently doing now if we go chronologically. So for the sake of brevity and at personal sacrifice, could you jump to, do you remember the first time you shot a video where you're in front of the camera and you're experimenting or whatever that motivation was to get started? But when you started publishing video of yourself or even audio, do you remember when that happened and what business it was for?
In that consulting firm, I did some work with Home Shopping Network, and I was an on-air guest a lot of the time, but that was just live. I did hundreds of hours of live TV. But in 2007, Katie and I started.
No, that is the OG of video marketing.
It was.
Show the product online, sell it, make money, right?
Yeah. Well, show the product on TV, not online. It was actually on network TV.
On TV. Yeah, that's right.
But Ken, the first time that I did content for a business that I owned was in 2007. My wife and I started our first online business, our first information products business called the Certified Distressed Property Expert. And it was back during the very beginnings of the foreclosure crisis that most people attribute to 2008, but we felt it in 2007. And I started recording I think it was just webinars, like audio only webinars with slides to show people what was happening in the foreclosure crisis, and then distributing it to wherever I could. And really, I wanted people to be aware of what was going on in the market. And so that was the first time that I did it for my product.
Okay. And walk me through that. Did you go take a course on how to do a webinar, or again, you just hacked through it and figured it out? What did that look like?
There wasn't really courses back then, Ken. There wasn't
2007, right?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of information out there.
That's pretty early.
I hacked through it. I actually used a outline from when I was in high school in my speech class called the informative outline. It was like introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them, preview, 3 parts of what you're going to tell them. It's very much like the webinar outlines of today, only they use different labels. And my goal was to educate people and then show them we had a solution.
Okay. It's really simple. And if I remember correctly, because this is, I heard this probably in, multiple podcasts from you, this business grew extraordinarily fast and then kind of disappeared because the crisis ended, right? The housing crisis. So you moved from that, and now is it the business you're in now that was the next logical step, or was there something in between?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. I wish I could say there was a next logical step. What happened was, after we had that product in the distressed property market, about 2013, we had this slogan, solving the foreclosure crisis one homeowner at a time. In 2013, we had a person come from the U.S. Treasury and record a broadcast in our office that we put out to about 30,000 people. And she said we had pulled forward the foreclosure recovery by 5 to 7 years. So I remember sitting there and thinking, yes, this is awesome. And at the same time, like, oh crap, we're done. Like, this product isn't going to be necessary. It's not relevant anymore. And
painted yourself into a corner, right?
100%. And so after that, we had a coaching company for a while in real estate. We had about 400 coaching members that paid $1,000 a month. And we had a team of coaches. And I decided I wanted to transition out of real estate. I really liked working with entrepreneurs with different types of businesses. And so there's been a lot of transitions in that time. And we started teaching what we teach today in classes in like 2013 as a business exclusively, starting about 2017.
Okay. So that's like a 10-year gap from the housing crisis to what you're doing right now, right? So I think that, this lead up has been awesome. I've been, I can't believe how many businesses you've gone through. I've gone through a lot, but not as many as you, and not at the scale that you have. So I'm going to continue following you throughout, all your podcasts. But tell me a bit about what's the growth of your current coaching business look like? What's that trajectory? The reason I'm asking is I think a lot of people get discouraged quickly. They might start because there's 3 people who say, yeah, I'd pay you, right? And then they start their little consulting or coaching or training business. And then it doesn't grow from there, or, one drops out and they're down 33% on their revenue. And now that's a huge drop, right? And then like maybe a year passes and they're not seeing that sudden growth. But for you, what did that trajectory look like when starting your coaching business?
Ken, it's interesting. When you ask that question, it's like, I know the goal of your podcast is to like share with people. Part of what we're doing here is sharing with people like why content is important and why it's important to put content out there and why it's important to maybe put yourself out there. And, when I look at every business I've ever worked with, I look at businesses as a movement, and it's just most businesses are not that good at being a movement. And when you look at a lot of what I've done is I've gone out and I've advocated for entrepreneurs. I've defended entrepreneurs. I explain to entrepreneurs an insights and a different perspective on who we are as a population. And so that's where most of the growth of our coaching business has come from. And right now we're in a process where we're putting together a new deliverable where we want to get it out to a lot more entrepreneurs. Right now we have a high ticket coaching model. And what happens is right now, 9 out of 10 people who come to us are in the earlier stages of entrepreneurship, but they need the solution we have. And so right as we speak, we're putting together a new model where we can reach a lot more entrepreneurs and help a lot more people with the stuff that we do.
Yeah. Now, when you say movement, right, you advocate for entrepreneurs. Love it. Love it. Could you break that down a little bit? What does it mean to advocate? Does it mean write books? Does it mean reach out specifically to people? All of the above. Could you tell me how you advocate?
Yeah. Is it okay if I share a framework?
I'd love to. That's exactly what we're here for.
Okay. So I've always been obsessed with business, and ever since I was a kid, like you can tell by the stories that I tell. And I always read a lot about businesses. I was inspired by businesses. My heroes were entrepreneurs. Other kids had like sports heroes. I had entrepreneurial heroes. I looked up to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I know Gates has become super controversial, but back then he was the guy who dropped out of Stanford and went and built Microsoft and was the richest man in the world at one point when he looked like he was about 25 years old. And my study of businesses and my study of a lot of other stuff kind of led to this clear realization that businesses are movements, and there's 4 parts to a movement. If you look at any movement throughout history, there's 4 parts. You have to define and unify your movement, tell them who they are. You have to provide a plan for your movement, show them what they should do. Then you have to advocate for that movement louder than anybody else does, or you have to defend that movement louder than anybody else does, and then advocate for that movement. So watch, I'll show you in just 2 examples. So if you look at the civil rights movement, which is one of my favorite movements in history, it's persisted regardless of who the leader was. There didn't have to be an attractive character, although there's been dozens of them, some that are more well-known than others. But if you look at the civil rights movement, define and unify, it's anyone who wants freedom and equality for everyone. And the provide a plan is passive resistance, protest. We're going to change things through having our voices heard. And the defend against is defending people against segregation and, and racism and all the things that hold people down. And the advocate for is the entire world will get better when all of us are on equal footing. And so those 4 parts exist in every movement. Now, I'll give you a crazy example. I just shared this with a friend of mine the other day. There's this meal replacement product called Slimfast. And if you're over 40 years old and somebody says, what is a shake for breakfast, a shake for lunch, and a sensible meal? People will yell out Slimfast because we heard it our whole childhoods. It came up over and over and over again. So Slimfast, the defining unify is people who want to look good without doing any work. And the provide a plan is a shake for breakfast, a shake for lunch, and a sensible meal. And the defend against going to meetings and Weight Watchers and having to put a lot of effort, cooking your own food. This is the easy way to look good. And the advocate for is you can look like you want to look without having to do a lot of work. It's like automatically easy. And I shared this with a friend and they were like, man, Slimfast really was awesome. And I'm like, oh, no. Slimfast wasn't awesome. Slimfast continues to be awesome. If you go on Amazon today and you search meal replacement drink, Slimfast is 3 or 4 of the top 10 SKUs on Amazon. Because they had this movement where at one point I remember in the 90s and when I was consulting, if I went into an office and I opened the refrigerator, there would be lines of Slimfast bottles with people's Post-it notes on them because so many people were using that product. And so when you look at any business, if you can do those 4 things, if you can define and unify your market, if you can provide a simple plan, if you are the person out in the public who is defending that market against where they are under attack, and every market is under attack, and then you advocate for that market changing things, you will be seen naturally as that market's leader.
Okay. Well, I love everything you say. Now, my head is kind of swimming because all of a sudden, as you're saying it, I'm trying to take everything you're saying and apply it to my business because, Alex, I know that you have a very limited personal time, and it took me forever to get you booked on here. So, and thank you for coming here. But while you're here, because I got you, how would you apply this to a business like mine, where I'm looking for how to advocate for business owners who are probably at $500,000 to maybe $10 million? Those are my ideal clients. and they need help to create more content, put it online. I mean, besides doing this podcast, which is trying to convince people, hey, there's a lot of people who are doing really well and making content. And I'm very transparent about the purpose of this podcast, but it's a very eclectic group of entrepreneurs that I'm working with. And specifically, they want to build a brand, or they feel the need to, but maybe they don't want to. Like that's a, advocate for, defend, what was the other two? Define, unify.
Well, no, first defining unify. First is defining unify. So whenever somebody tells me that there's not similarities or they have an eclectic group of people, I think that that's like a limited belief. In fact, when you look at entrepreneurs as a collective whole have things that are similar. So when I say define and unify, here's what I hear and what you're saying. You want to work with entrepreneurs who care a lot about what they're doing, and who really do feel like they're changing the world, and who want to make a bigger contribution and want to make a bigger impact. And in order to do those things, the provide a plan that you share with them, Ken, is, look, if you create a platform and you put content out in the world and people see you as the leader of your market, then you will have more people coming towards you that you can help. And the defend against is, quite frankly, I think you defend against the people that are saying, hey, you don't have to have a following. You don't have to have a market. You don't have to be a thought leader. When I hear people say that to entrepreneurs these days, I'm like, I don't understand why you would ever tell an entrepreneur that, because if you have a platform, growing your business becomes exponentially easier. If you're seen as a leader in your market, then what you say actually matters. And if you don't have that platform, if you don't have content out there, then you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your ability to grow the business. And they advocate for a business like yours is, you have to defend against everybody who's telling them not to do it. And the advocacy is, look, if you are seen as a leader in your market, then half of the work is done. You just have to put the other half into building your product. And I think so many entrepreneurs don't understand that they're leading a movement. And really, when I look at it, you're advocating for entrepreneurs actually becoming the leader of that movement through doing those things in their business.
It does. It totally does. And the aha moment I just had is that a lot of the clients I have, well, there's varying degrees of success. The ones that do really well have a really clearly defined movement. The ones that do so-so and have to push a lot of money behind the videos we give them in order to make them perform, those are the ones who give very generic advice, like stuff that you could find anywhere else. So thank you for that.
If you're going to give advice you can find anywhere else, you shouldn't.
I'm going to frame that, quote it. If I had a button right now, I'd be like, burr, 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 burr. That if anything, that's the quote that's going to go up. If you have advice that can be found anywhere else, you shouldn't give it. Wow.
You shouldn't give it, and it's interesting what you just said, because I have this belief that every business is a movement, but most of them just aren't that good. And when we share this framework with people, when we say, look, you've got 4 things that you do. When you're communicating to the people you want to be involved in your movement, you define and unify. You say, this is who you are, and this is the plan, right? So you look at another really incredible movement in the entrepreneurial space today is a friend of mine, Russel Brunson. Like, Russel has changed the world of entrepreneurship in the past, it's only 5 or 6 years. He's got 100,000 people on the ClickFunnels platform. And when you look at what Russell's defining, his defining Unify is, listen to the introduction to his podcast, bootstrap entrepreneurs who are doing it themselves and won't cheat and take money. So it is clear. It is polarizing. It's like, hey, if you're doing this on your own, we are the team you want to be a part of. And then when you look at his provide a plan, throw the website out and actually create a process through which people can buy from you called the funnel. And you're only one funnel away from having success. And I know people make fun of that, and there's all types of memes about it. But you know what? The reality is, for most businesses, they really are one funnel away from really knocking it out of the park. And what does Russell defend against? He defends against bad marketing and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a website and not having direct response and putting a brand out there without a purpose. And what's his advocacy is, if you are an entrepreneur that has a product that should be in the world, here's a system that will get people to buy it, that will actually have transactions happen. And if you look at the wild success that ClickFunnels has had, it's because he communicates exactly who he's working with, gives them a very clear plan on how to build a funnel with the tools to do it. Then if you listen to what Russell says in the market all the time, he is defending entrepreneurs against people taking their money without getting results. And he's advocating for going out there and actually selling something to prove that you're changing the world.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything you say there, I'm inside nodding. And if you're listening, then then I'll tell you I'm nodding. If you're watching, then you know I'm nodding. And here's the I can't remember who said it, but they said when your audience is nodding inside, then you know you got them, right? And you've connected really well with your audience. Now, you mentioned Russell Brunson here, and I don't know if you're okay with this, but would you? And I know some of the names of the people who you've coached or they've been through your program. Would you mention a few other people who you've helped train and get them to? And I know some very, very famous people, but are there any that you're willing to mention, talk about, so the people in the audience might be able to see your fingerprint on other people's work, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I have permission to share.
And then also some people who just straight out stole too, right? We don't have to mention that if you don't want to.
We won't mention those people, but no, I mean, you know, I've had since 2016, I've been privileged to work with some incredible entrepreneurs. You know, I did a ton of work with Russel and ClickFunnels. At one point, I was even a coach for their 2 Comma Club program. A lot of our systems and our structures are used internally at ClickFunnels. I worked with Alex and Layla Hormozi when their company Gym Launch was just a couple $1 million up to when it was in the 30 millions. They just had an exit for, I think, 45 million. Brandon and Kaylin Poulin at Lady Boss, when they were sub $10 million, we helped them get into the tens of millions. They were in our program for a while. Daniel Rosen, who runs Credit Repair Cloud, $35 million business now. We started with him at a couple million. Rachel Rogers, who, geez, like Rachel's just, I mean, she's everywhere. Good Morning America, Target. Her book, We Should All Be Millionaires, is all over the place. She's just an extraordinary entrepreneur. I think she joined us at around 2 million, and we helped her grow into the tens of millions, into the 8 figures. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a short list. There's a lot more. We've been fortunate that, you know, we have a structure and a system that works for visionaries to help them get out of doing everything themselves. And we've also worked with some, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm taking credit for any of those people's success. They were in our program. They're extraordinary entrepreneurs. They applied our systems to what they were already doing, and they got there faster.
Yeah. I love it. And if you're willing to share, could you, with your consulting / coaching business right now, what's your annual revenue look like in round numbers? If you want, you could just say we're 8 figures or 7 figures, or if you want to give the closest 7-figure digit, that's fine too.
Yeah, you know, right now, Kim, we're a 7-figure business, and it's been purposeful. You know, Katie and I have been running this business as a lifestyle business up until a couple years ago, because I was homeschooling my kids. And there was a long time where Katie was doing it. Then there was a part of time where I was doing it. And, you know, I always tell entrepreneurs that you don't have to sacrifice your family. You don't have to sacrifice the things that are important to you, and you can still run a business. So I built a team, and the business does not get 100% of my time. It gets probably about 12 hours a week. And a lot of my time is spent on myself, my health, my family, my kids. And Reagan, my oldest, is now 15. My youngest is now going to be 13 this month. And we're looking at, like, how do we take this back to an 8-figure business like we've run before? Okay. Well,
I can't wait to see that trajectory as it goes. And the question that I've been trying to segue into up until now is, what does your current content creation process look like? I know you've got some podcasts. I don't know how often you do them, or you know, if there's any other channels you're on, like YouTube, Facebook, and things like that. Could you explain like a bit of your planning process, your editing, the distribution, and things like that?
Sure. Yeah. The primary mechanism we have for attracting leads today is our podcast. It's called Momentum for the Entrepreneurial Personality Type. We just hit 3 million downloads.
Wow. Congratulations. That's exactly what we're here for.
It's, you know, every day when I release every time I release a podcast, I'm speaking to a room of thousands of people. And so my process is, it's always been the same. You know, our podcast format is different than most. It's just me first person about 95% of the time. Every once in a while I have a guest, or every once in a while I'll share something else. But my goal is that each individual episode solves a problem for an entrepreneur, and each individual episode changes a mindset around something for an entrepreneur in less than 20 minutes. I try and keep the episodes somewhere between about 10 to 16 minutes, something like that. I know my audience, you know, that's like an average car ride. That's an average, you know, time in between a meeting. And so I wanted to make it so that people could listen to it like that. People always ask me, like, what's your setup? What's your tech? I have this little microphone. I plug it into my phone. I walk around my office. I record an episode. I upload it, and then my team takes it. We use Libsyn, and it gets distributed everywhere. And so we put it on Libsyn. We put it on our website. We send out an email to our list, and that's our primary vehicle for marketing today. It's
so as far as you go, you're pretty much. Well, where do you get the sources of your questions? Do you have your team compile stuff from your community or research, or is it just? Do you have an internal muse that comes up with the topics to talk about?
It's a combination of it's a combination of a lot of things, but I would say that a lot of it comes out of conversations that I have with people in our program or conversations that I have with entrepreneurs outside of our program. I did a podcast this morning on stepping into discomfort, on why I do cold plunges and why I think entrepreneurs need to step into discomfort. And I was literally getting out of this is my process. I don't know that this would work for everybody. But sometimes I'll be driving down the road, or like this morning, I was literally jumping out of my cold plunge and I'm like, man, I need to share this with people. And so when inspiration hits, I try and record a podcast right then. And sometimes I'll, whenever I have an idea for a podcast, if I don't have time to do it, I'll write it. And I have this running list of podcasts. But a lot of the time I'm driving down the road and I'm thinking about a conversation that I had with somebody. And I'm like, you know what? The details of this conversation would be useful to other entrepreneurs. And so I'll share the story, then tell people how it applies to them, and then give them some things that they can do tactically to be able to apply it to their lives. And that's how most episodes are made that way.
Okay. That totally works. I love it. And I think that this goes, what you just described there about your setup and your gear, it's really runs parallel to what I tell people all the time about video setups. Everybody asks you what camera and what mic and all that. And the thing I always say is buying the gear is not the gateway to start making content. It's the reward for having created content that has converted some customers. Like, use your phone, make some content, whether it's audio, video. And once you start converting some people, reward yourself with a fancy camera. That's the reward, not the gateway. And they just got the horse and the wagon thing mixed up there.
Or you don't. Like, I just want to make the point. You don't ever have to get obsessed with gear.
You don't have to.
You don't ever have to get excited about cameras.
But some people want to.
Some people want to.
Like, why do girls wear makeup, right? Because they want to look good.
Yeah.
Right? That's why guys buy cameras.
And I totally understand, for some people they want to, but I think that one of the things that scares people away from creating content is like, oh, I don't have the camera. I don't have the microphone. I don't have a lapel. I don't have all these other things. I've recorded videos that hundreds of thousands or millions of people have seen on my iPhone. And a friend of mine a few years ago shot a feature film called Supercharged, and they filmed the first half of the film using studio cameras, and they filmed the second half of the film using iPhones. And the first half of the film cost them 5 times as much as the second half. And if you watch the movie, you would not be able to tell a difference. And so, don't ever let gear or equipment or any of that stuff get in your way. This morning, my microphone was upstairs and I felt inspired getting out of the cold plunge. I didn't have a microphone. I just went straight onto the iPhone. Russel's podcast, Marketing Secrets, that he has tens of thousands of downloads every episode. It's him most of the time driving in his car and just recording straight on the iPhone, no microphone, no nothing. So don't ever let gear be a hindrance.
That's right. Love it. Now, one question I get asked a lot is, I'd love to hear your take on it, is at what point do you think that somebody who's creating content, either on your phone or with DSLR camera, should they bring on some team or hire somebody to actually do all the editing and the processing for them?
Oh man, I did that pretty early because I'm not good at any of that stuff. I think that, and today it's easier than ever to do that. There's people out there who provide the service and will probably do it better than you. I think that as soon as you start to get some traction with your content, look to help, because a lot of times bringing on someone who has experience in content creation or content editing, they'll tell you, hey, if you film your stuff like this, we can get way more content out of it. We can use it in different places. So I would say, as soon as you start getting some traction, don't let the team be the impediment to doing it. But when you start getting some traction, when you start getting comfortable with it, get some help.
Absolutely. Alex, thanks so much for that. Do you have anything that you've seen people who struggle with creating content? Like, I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and you help them get over hurdles. You can diagnose them pretty quickly. Hey, you're stuck here because A, B, C, and D. And if you've ever seen people struggle with getting, their content machine started or getting comfortable in front of the camera, what advice did you have, or would you have? Let's say there is somebody, hypothetically, if that hasn't happened yet.
No, that's totally happened. There's a couple pieces of advice. First, get really clear on what we talked about earlier. Who are you talking to? Like, who is your avatar? Who is that defining Unify? What is the plan that you have for them? Every business has a plan. Like, why is yours better? And what are you defending the people who are coming towards you against? There's always something to defend and there's something to advocate for. And if you get clear on those four things, there's unlimited content. You know, I've done content, or I've done podcasts on advocating for entrepreneurs, because if we're in a crisis, entrepreneurs are the ones who are going to solve the crisis, and advocating for, you know, entrepreneurs having teams, because visionaries can't do it all themselves. Like, there's unlimited amounts of content in that. And if you're having trouble getting started, here's what I do when I'm stuck. And even though I've done thousands of pieces of content, hundreds of hours of live video, hundreds of hours of live TV, I've been on major news networks, all those things, I still get stuck. So if you're starting out and you're like, but I get stuck. Okay, well, we all do. Here's what I do. I get like one person in my mind, and I think about the challenge that person's having, and I record the content as though I'm talking to them. And when I do it, it's funny, you know, there's times where I don't do that. There's times where I'm driving down the road and I'm like, okay, here's something I really need to tell everybody. But when I get clear on a single person in my mind, and that's who I'm talking to, those are the podcasts that people send me messages about. Those are the ones that people say, hey, this one was game changing. Because when you get focused on helping a single person and solving their problem, everyone is going to get that same result.
Love it. Love it. That's it also gives a much more intimate feel for the person. Really feels like you're talking to them. And if you're doing that in your current podcasts, I feel it, Matt. You're talking to me. I feel like you've been reading my emails or something.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate
it. Especially the ones about relationships. Man, I'm just like, damn, that hit me. Like, how does he know this? So really good job on that. You execute on what you teach really well. So thank you for that.
Whenever I'm doing a relationships one, there is always a single person I'm talking to, because it's usually after getting off a call with a relationship or with an entrepreneur who's having trouble in their relationship.
So guys, I just want to say, if you're listening to this and you got some value out of it, I want to describe Alex Charfen as somebody who I've grown to know is super, super generous with sharing what works. Also really disciplined about what's business and, like how to get people into his systems where his team takes over. I was actually a client of yours for some time and taking the courses until the time zones got a little bit difficult for me because I'm in Japan and you're in the US. But look, it was super valuable while I was inside. And I want to encourage anyone who's listening, if any of this has spoken to you, please check out the links in the show notes. Alex, how should people get in touch with you if they resound with you, they want to figure out what you're up to now, or maybe have an interview with somebody on your team about working with you?
Okay, so there's the indirect way. If you want to hear more of the solutions I was talking about, you can go to momentumpodcast.com. We stream on all the major platforms, but at Momentum Podcast, you can search all 800 and something episodes that we've had and find the specific solution you're looking for. And then if you'd like to get some help with your business and running the process and structure that makes it so you don't have to do it all yourself, you can go to simpleoperations.com, just simpleoperations.com, and sign up for a call with my team.
Perfect. And I do encourage you guys to do that. Check the links down below if you're in YouTube, the description, and if you're on podcast, check the show notes. Alex, thank you so much for getting on the show. I appreciate you, and I will be back in touch. And I'll tell you what, that beginning part, when you started telling your story, it opened up way too many questions. I was like, I'll never get through this. So I had to shortcut it, but I will be reviewing your past podcasts again, see if I can fill in some of the blanks for myself. Thank you so much for being on the show, Alex.
Oh, Ken, it's my pleasure. And dude, I'm so glad that you're doing this, because if there's ever someone who is an expert in their field and what they do, it's you. And I want everyone to know you actually trained our high ticket membership on how to do video, how to do content. Your stuff's incredible. We got so many comments about that. So if you're listening to Ken and you're creating content, you're absolutely in the right place.
Oh, thanks so much for that. I appreciate it, Alex. All right, take care and bye for now.